Welcome to our podcast, Resilient Heroes, where we are dedicated to showcasing the incredible journeys and contributions of women in the field of emergency management. I'm your host, Laura James. Hello, Resilient Heroes, and thank you for joining me today. I have an amazing emergency management professional. Her name is Michelle Pappas. She has over 15 years of experience in the emergency management and crisis management sector, and we're so excited to welcome her to join us today. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
So you work in both emergency management, business continuity, and general crisis management, correct?
Yeah, as well as certified in risk management also.
So you are a woman of all trades in this particular industry. Now, tell me a little bit about what inspired you to pursue a career in emergency management?
I think that's a really great question. And I find everybody has such a unique story as to how they end up in this industry. For me, it was, right from the time that I was very young. So when I was in high school and even younger than that, I did a lot of volunteering for vulnerable populations and all kinds of different, passionate causes through my adolescence. And when I got to university, I ended up doing some international volunteering abroad, both for the tsunami over in Thailand and the earthquake down in Haiti. And when I returned from those trips, I had an amazing professor who I'll share with you more about later, who introduced me to the concept of, emergency response and emergency management as a profession. And that really just it just hit a spot within my heart. It was like a light bulb went off, and I haven't looked back since.
And so that is not unlike many of our listeners and our guests, in that it was something in your personal life, whether that's a volunteering position in the community or something else that brought you to the profession proper. So you told me that you did a little bit of overseas work. What is your education background?
So when I found out about this program, I'd been working on an undergraduate degree in social psychology, behavioral psychology, and business, actually. So organizational behavior, that type of thing. And I quickly shifted into the emergency management program. At that time, there were really only a handful of programs in Canada that were offering, especially at a master's level, which ended up kind of falling on my lap. I had reservations about continuing school. It was 7 years at that point. So, but they really, convinced me, and I saw the value long term. So I joined the master's program at York U, and I had a great couple of years with them. And since then, I've been, for me personally, and I think a lot of people in this field, it's a lifelong journey of learning, right? So academia has always kind of been on the peripheral. Following, my emergency management master's degree, well, my master of disaster, as they call it. I ended up finding business continuity because I moved into private sector. So I got certified and spent quite a bit of time doing ISO and a bunch of other certifications through DRI. And then recently I completed my risk management certification through SFU, because of course we all know that in this field you need to be able to identify and assess risks to be able to understand where to put your efforts best. So I felt that they all went really well. So and I have, of course, more academic passions and things I'm looking forward to in the future. So I think, I'm just a lifelong learner in this field for sure.
And I think that's common amongst all of our resilient heroes, and probably amongst all of our listeners, is that passion to continue to grow professionally, but also personally, in order to be the best EM folks that we can be. So talk to me a little bit about your experience, because I know that you have lived in multiple places over the years, which has given you, I think, a lot of insight into how EM is, and business continuity really, are approached in different areas in Canada. And so you have that sort of a unique perspective.
Lots of experience. And yes, I have traveled quite a lot for my career, which is, a blessing. I've lived in 4 provinces across Canada, so I'm quite well versed in kind of the nuances between provincial responses. And I've spent a lot of time in the US as well. So Professionally, I took a leave of absence during my master's degree to help run the Emergency Operations Center, set it up. It was called the Main Operations Center, but ultimately it was an EOC for the Pan Am Games in Toronto back in 2015 when they were around. So that was a really great experience. Spent a lot of time working with local municipalities. And then as well, I ended up, the big move for me was coming out of my master's that summer was the Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo wildfires. And yeah, it was at that point the biggest evacuation Canada had ever seen, as we know. And they were hiring like crazy, of course, AEMA and the rest of the government of Alberta. And I was willing to relocate. So I went and spent a year there and was part of the Wildfire Recovery Task Force, which was really amazing. Really just got so much understanding of what was going on the front lines and, the amount of effort and costs and everything associated with such a large event, right? And the complexity of all the layers of government and agencies that are responding and private sector. So that was exciting. And then from there, I moved over to BC and I spent a long, long time. Somehow I ended up in the rail sector.
Critical infrastructure.
And it kind of morphed because I was, coming out of tourism, hospitality and tourism, large events, that kind of stuff, emergency management for all of that. And so we had a tourism client that was rail based, and that just kind of morphed into full-time rail sector work. But I've also had the opportunity of working with financial tech companies, as well as, all kinds of other private industries and non-for-profit. So quite well diverse in that respect.
And so you really have seen such a diverse workforce and workplaces. So I want to dig into that a little bit here for Resilient Heroes and talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you think women commonly face in the field. And have there been specific, instances that you would like to share or lessons that you think you've learned over the years? I certainly feel that I have found my voice over the years, that I have gained, confidence in seeing how women interact, but also, some of the challenges they face. So talk to me a little bit about that, because you have worked in so many sectors. And so maybe you feel like there's some differences between them, or maybe you have some insights around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's application to the EM world, but then of course, just women in corporate and women in the workforce in general, really, there's a lot to unpack there. As I've gotten older, I've gotten wiser and I have found my voice and a lot more confident over time. So that's been really helpful. And I think that just comes with wisdom and practice and making mistakes, of course, along the way. But I will say, as a career-driven woman in particular, there have been challenges, particularly around the concept of having a family. I think can be very difficult for women in general to not difficult to do both. We're capable of it, but I find at times something always has to sacrifice. And whether that's your career kind of stalling out for a couple of years while you raise an infant, or, the choice to chase your career at the sacrifice of actually having a family, which, a lot of us kind of choose to do. So I think that is something that's unique to women. My experience is that men don't quite have the same level of pressure in that way. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, they can have a family, they can have a baby at home and still go and like build their careers, right? And I would say, no matter how hard you work at it as a mother, for me, there is, as we know in EM, the schedule is not 9 to 5. It is 100% out of our control. And my daughter, while in her teens now, certainly has memories of me not being there for big events in her life. And that's a bit of a sacrifice. And then it's not unique to EM. There are certainly many, many careers where that's the case. But you're right. It is certainly a challenge. And, in a long activation or response, I can go days without having good time with family because I'm working a 12-hour shift, and that takes a toll. And so you're right. And I would say it also,
It can, and I've had this, it can limit opportunities when they're put on the table, because whether you admit it or not, people will think, well, does Laura have any challenges? Does she need to be at home, without actually asking me, but making an assumption around that. And so I would agree with you. It's certainly one of the sectors where we really have to consider and have a community around us if we choose to have a family, because you really can't do it alone if you're required to be somewhere else.
Absolutely. And I mean, you hit it on the nail, like to a family aside, if you're a woman, be prepared that this industry, you are going to work nights, you're going to work weekends,
holidays.
The rail, for example, where, rail's operating 24/7, 365 days a year. And a lot of businesses are operating that way, and we never know when emergencies are going to happen. So that's definitely one thing that we all experience, I'm sure, at certain points in our career, but I think some of the other kind of challenges I've seen and I've experienced as a woman, and I mean, again, it's all perception and how you choose to deal with things. But, when I first entered this field, a lot of EM professionals were driven by first responders. So it was very common that you would see like the director or the VP of EM was also the fire chief, or, very closely aligned. And traditionally, a lot of those roles were male dominated. So I did see a lot of women in the industry, but we were often in kind of those planning roles, the more administrative roles, and like leadership was often very male dominant. I do believe that that's shifting to some degree. I will say, maybe my experience as well, working in the rail sector, that in itself is a very male-dominated industry.
100% it is, yes. It is.
So, and DEI conversations aside, because I know that's a hot topic these days.
Such a hot topic.
I'm still an advocate for, some diversity in leadership for sure. And I think women, have a seat at the table. And what I love about women in particular is we have this ability to really understand like such complex networks and complex systems and multitask really well. And so, my approach has just been to lean into who I am, to build that confidence in who I am in kind of a sitting around a table of all men. And it seems to have worked out. But of course, you have to have a voice, and you have to be, willing to show up, right? So that's kind of been the other challenge. I think in a lot of leadership roles, I haven't seen a lot of female kind of, guru, so to speak, in the EM. And I think that's changing over time.
I think that is changing. And I think it really is probably this generation where we'll have, our first female leaders, really strong leaders in that role. And so, I'm happy to be part of that change. You're part of that change. We will be the people that people are looking up to, which is amazing. Now, you mentioned the ability for women to, to look at a very complex problem and break it down quite quickly as one of the strengths. And I absolutely agree. So are there any other strengths or perspectives that you think we bring to the table that aren't necessarily, something that we're trained for, but is more inherent to our to women in general?
Actually, look, I mean, as we spoke about, like, I'm an advocate for personal development. I think the only way to grow and get better is to really focus on those areas of yourself that you want to improve, while also embracing like the uniqueness of you, right? Instead of, for many, many years, like I'm a pretty type A personality, in case you haven't been able to tell. And I fought that for a long time, right? Yeah. It just comes off in my voice. But I fought that for a long time because I thought that by kind of playing small, it would make me, less threatening to my male counterparts. And now I've realized to embrace it and work on it, right? So that it's done in a way that, is friendly and is warm and inviting, and still allows that feminine side of me to exist, while also being a boss and getting things done, right?
100%.
So yeah, I think, the other thing that women really bring to the table, and it's so interesting, again, just sitting and reminiscing on so many discussions I've had at tables with 10, 5, 15, and 90% of the table is male dominated. I will say, honestly, I find women in general to be a little less emotional. We're emotional in different ways, but it's been quite interesting to watch the dynamics of a group of men disagreeing and not being on the same page, and recognizing, wow, the thing about women is, yes, we're emotional and we're empathetic, we're compassionate, right? But in challenging situations, we're actually a lot more pragmatic at times and solution focused.
And I was going to say that, yeah, results oriented.
Yeah, I actually find difficult and critical conversations that happen in the workplace between a group of women, or, and that's not to exclude men. There are many men that are part of this, right? But we're able to kind of get past the emotional piece and to the solution a lot faster. So I think that's something that we really need to embrace and be able to bring to the table, especially in really difficult discussions and decision making, which happen all the time in the midst of emergencies. Yeah, exactly.
I absolutely agree. And I would say that even when you find yourself at the table as, the one and only woman or a couple of other women in the conversation, one of the skill sets I think that we bring is that we can sort on the input of all those people and really get to the heart of, this, you said solutions oriented and I said results based, but what we're really saying is the same thing in that I can remove what I would say the passion from the room and get to the heart of the resolution. And I think that is something that is really key to our skill set, because for us, it is about the best solution, the one that brings the most resolution for the communities that we're dealing with, whether that's our own workplace or the broader communities that we serve. I think we're always thinking about that versus our own specific interest in something at the time. And I hate to say this because I don't think I've said it on any of the episodes so far, but I would say the conversations that I have with women or women bring to the table in a very high stress situation are less ego driven and more results driven. And that maybe is a personality trait, right?
Yeah. I would agree with that. I mean, look, I have a very profound respect for men, and I have learned so much from my male mentors.
Myself too.
In no way is this putting them down at all, because they have their own strengths, right? Their own things that they bring to the table. And I'm so incredibly grateful for, my healthy professional working relationships, right? There's been some not so healthy ones over the years, but overall, I really respect men, and it's great to be around them and work with them. But there's something, I'm a girl's girl. I like being with women. I like having conversations, difficult conversations, coming to solutions, thinking outside the box, and being, very, to your point, results kind of oriented with them. And we have some really great, I just reflect on some of the coffee chats we've had in the midst of a global crisis, like just amazing relationships, really.
And I would agree with that. And I would say that, I came up in a very male dominated profession. I started out with a forestry degree. I think I shared that with you. So, in Northern Ontario, 25 years ago, there was certainly not a lot of women in the profession. And I would say that throughout my career, as you have observed, we're really this generation just coming up to the leadership roles now, which, we couldn't do without the men around us to support us and really bring us along as part of the team. I 100% appreciate it. And I would say many of my best mentors throughout my career have been the men around me.
Yes, me as well.
And so I really, appreciate and honor them. And I will forever appreciate and honor the space that they give me at the table, because, I wouldn't be here without them. Now, what are there? And so sort of following along those lines, do you think there's specific opportunities for women to excel in emergency management?
The profession on its own right now is in an accelerated, exponential acceleration of growth. It's very obvious to me. I will say the one thing that I often, thank the universe or thank God for is the blessing of being able to see that this was an area that was going to grow. I feel like I forever have job security. That's for sure. And, the world is waking up to what we do, right? 20 years ago, most organizations didn't believe that they would ever be impacted by, some natural event, some man-made event. I think now every organization is putting effort there. So that says a lot. And I think for women, it really comes down to what you're most passionate about. I mean, look, we're going to work for 40 years of our lives or more. You don't want to do something that you can't stand doing, right? And, for me personally, I'm just going to speak from my own experience. My passion in emergency management has changed over the years. When I was younger, I loved being in the front lines, right? I loved being like in the midst of all of it. And now as I've gotten older, I love to do more strategic things, more resiliency building pieces and components. So there's a lot of room to kind of move depending on what it is that you're interested in. I think the most important thing is to just kind of hone in on what you're really good at and get really, really good at that, and then add another skill, and that was, I've read that in a number of books, right? It's like, get really good at doing one thing super well. And then once you're good at that, add another skill. And that's kind of the approach I've taken to my career personally. And it's really benefited me.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that is really important. And we're lucky that this field has so much diversity, that it allows us to sort of taste everything, get really good at something, and then move on to the next thing. And your career is really one that has allowed you to follow a path of, continuous growth and improvement. And in speaking to offline, you're continuing to do that, so there's no sort of there's no slowing down, there's just forward momentum, and I love that, because as you said, we're going to spend our careers doing this, so find something that you're passionate about. But I love that emergency management allows us to make those changes in our career path, because it, my passion changes, and you're exactly right. For me, that there is a little bit around, so I'm drawn to the emergency social services. I have that sort of community resilient lens and empathy, though that is not my background at all. And my background is more scientifically based, but I find myself more drawn to how do we make things better in the moment and after, post emergency for communities, and really put a lens on what that looks like, because it is one of the failures of our communities, is that, once the lights and sirens disappear, we sort of forget that there's hundreds or thousands of people that are impacted, and what that looks like for months, if not years down the line. And so, it's one of the things I think about as I move forward in my career. What are some of those rewarding things that I might want to work on? But that's totally different than what I wanted to do 5 years ago. So you're right. And we're lucky to have those opportunities.
Well, yeah. And I mean, the blessing is, look, like every area of the world needs these skills. So,
exactly right.
For me, I tend to be a little bit more business focused. And so I ended up loving working in private sector. It took me a while to figure that out. But once I got to private sector, that's kind of where I found my niche. And look, I mean, I was never one to really want to work in healthcare, yet I have colleagues who are experts in emergency management and healthcare, and they're amazing human beings who are doing really great work. So, the benefit of this is like, look, if you're really passionate about a specific industry, there is a need for you there. It might not be the traditional emergency management. It might be delivered more in a business continuity fashion, or, a crisis management kind of component. But regardless, there's opportunity there. And what I've found is, even if you choose to leave the industry entirely, the skills will never leave you. And so, like, I'm really focused on corporate, but in my home life and in my community and with my family, like, I still have this element of, emergency preparedness and risk management, right? That I bring to like my everyday life. Now, I will admit I'm a big risk taker. I don't know if that's just because I know how to do risk assessments really well, but I ride a motorcycle. I love kind of those adrenaline driving activities and sports and that kind of stuff. So I am a bit of a risk taker myself, but I find that these skills you just use in like everyday life as well. So they're really great to have.
That's 100% true, but it is annoying for our friends and family. So, for example, I go to a concert and I'm looking at all of the exits, looking at everybody in the crowd and thinking, what's the best way out of here? If I need to get out of here, how quickly could I do it?
It's quite funny, right?
It is. So, and you mentioned having some really strong mentors throughout your career. And so I haven't met anybody in the last decade or so who said, I did this all on my own. Everyone has really had a lot of support. And I think, many of us really needed that during the global pandemic, to reach out to each other and really mentor each other through some tough times. But talk to me a little bit about the mentorship that you've experienced, and then how is that translating as you become more and more senior in your career? Are you putting time into mentoring? Is that something on your, your future forward looking agenda? Tell me a little bit about your experience in that area.
Yeah, I think, you have a valid point. Mentorship is extremely important. I have always been blessed, even just look, in the relationships with my leadership, and even, spousal relationships, like you can find mentorship in so many different
So
ways,
many
right?
places.
And that's the beautiful thing about life. And there's a couple that stand out to me very clearly. My professor, who at the time wasn't intending to mentor me, so to speak, although he did become a mentor over time, Alain Norman. He's very
Yes.
well known in the industry. He retired from the city of Brampton after many, many years of an amazing career, written a couple of really great books. Well, he's actually the professor that introduced me to the concept of emergency management in
Wow.
general. Yeah, I was taking a crisis communications class with him, and I got back from Haiti, and he was like, "You should check out this program." And it was like, I'll always remember that time with him because he literally changed the trajectory of my entire
Of your
life.
career, yeah.
Yeah, and had faith in me and had belief in me, and not only that, I mean, he gave me an opportunity, gave me an internship, which was really valuable at the time, and then as well, following that, he acted as a reference a number of times for me, and so that really that relationship always stuck out as something that was really valuable to me.
Mm-hmm.
More recently, I have had mentors that have now, to your point, as my career has progressed, and I have a lot of experience now, a couple of things came up. I ended up getting back into teaching. So I was a student at one point, and then I became a teacher. And that was a very interesting transition for a number of reasons. Firstly, I recognized how little at the time when I was a student, I actually followed instructions.
Yes. Yes.
Because now I had students asking very basic questions where I was like, oh, well, the answer's in the syllabus. So I reflected on my own journey, and I thought, my goodness, I probably drove my professors crazy. But I love teaching. I love being in academia because I do feel like there is an element of mentorship there. And the way, so I'm over at the Justice Institute, and they're just lovely. The way they've structured their courses, it really is less of a I'm professing to you and much more of a I'm facilitating healthy discussions and facilitating conversation and reading of material and sharing of experience so that we can all come to, expand our collective consciousness around the topic in a weird way. I don't know, maybe that sounds a little far out there, but that's how I feel.
Yeah. That's exactly, I think, and probably we didn't understand back in the day that that's how we were being educated. But also, I would say, that has changed a little bit over the years. Mm-hmm. But you sort of how you had a mentor, Alain, and you found him in that same sort of space where you are now the one facilitating the conversation.
Yeah. And it's really remarkable. I mean, it's been really nice to, offer students the opportunity to connect on LinkedIn because that's a place where I feel very active. My professional career is very active there, and being able to open their eyes to other kinds of points of view. So that's been, in my experience, it's felt a little bit at times like a mentorship. And as well, I've actually done mentorship programs where, one-on-one mentorship over the course of 6 months with females particularly. And just helping them, particularly navigate corporate life.
I love to hear that because even just navigating, regardless of the sector or the corporation, navigating that is a difficult job on its own, regardless of what the professional challenges may be for that particular vertical. And so I love that. And it feels like you're getting some revitalization and some momentum just from those two mentoring opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to talk to you about one more thing that that is close to my heart, and I try and chat with all the guests about this, is that we really, in this field in particular, pour our heart and soul into our job. So when we are on, we are on. And, you've said you have been boots on the ground, over the years, multiple times. And so that means that you are giving everything during that time to everyone around you. So how do you fight the burnout, and how do you, your personal resilience, how do you make that a priority in your life? Because it's tough. And I think that for me, I'll just share, COVID really, it burned me out in a way that I didn't think would happen. And And I was surprised by that. And it really took some self-reflection to figure out how to move beyond that and keep my momentum in the field. So, and that happens, periodically. It's happened throughout my career, but never to that sort of scale. And so I'm always interested in how other women, deflect or reflect on the burnout that may be happening. And how do you keep your own personal resilience going when you feel, overwhelmed, or you've given everything to everyone for a profound amount of time, and now you just need to find yourself again?
Yeah, no, that's a really fair question. And I do feel one of the things that I had always said when I was in my master's program is we don't teach enough courses in these programs on mental health, because I noticed that it was a concern even just in academics. So at that point, I had been studying emergency management for like 5 to 7 years, right? And it's just case study after case study after case study of like, let's be honest, we're not dealing with like the most rosy types of incidents here, right? A lot of these are very traumatic. There's a lot of stuff that happens. So even coming out of that program, I felt like there wasn't enough support or emphasis put on, hey, if you're getting into this field, you need to start having healthy practices up front, because no matter who you are, male or female, this is just my opinion, you will experience a time in your life where you're either burnt out or you have some PTSD from what you've had to help deal with, right? So then, take that into the career. And it's like, okay, now you're doing wildfires and you're working around the clock for 6 to 8 weeks. There's very little sleep, very little time with your family and your friends, very little outlets for you to, kind of decompress from the work that you're doing, right? And then we experience a pandemic. And so, at the time, I thought, okay, like 2 months is like, I'm feeling tired after this, right? Well, during the pandemic, like many people in our profession were not laid off. In fact, we were some of the only people to, a handful of critical staff that would stick around. And so the organization I was with at the time went from 800 employees to 80, and I became responsible for a huge department, of which everybody else was laid off. And I operated basically around the clock for, 2+ years, like many other of us who responded to the pandemic. And I, like look, we are tough. And we are passionate about what we do. So we often push and push and push ourselves. We neglect our own selves for the sake of like others, really, truly, as many others do. And I think it came back to bite me in the butt, so to speak. I, like you, have had a complete crash afterwards, unlike any I had really ever experienced before. I like to kind of look at it like I almost had a minor brain injury, because I had been working at such a capacity of high stress for so long. The cortisol levels, were just through the roof. And my doctor actually explained it like, you imagine you taking a rubber band and you're just going around and around and around your brain, right? Because you're just so fixated and so concentrated. And, I became responsible for risk management at the time. So I couldn't unplug from the news. Like I was just 100% in it. So I actually had to take a leave of absence to rest. And at the time I felt very, not ashamed, but like there was this, kind of, again, I was in the rail sector. So it was like, come on, just like suck it up and keep going, right?
Yeah.
So I really struggled, and I was penalized for taking that leave when I got back. So, it was very, very difficult for me personally. And I know a lot of other people. And I will say that I actually don't think that I took about just under 4 months at that time. I don't actually think that solves the problem. Yes, I rested, but I didn't really take the time to learn new skills on how to cope better. Right. So it actually took me a couple of years coming out of COVID to really feel like 100% myself again. It probably wasn't until really 2023, 2024 that I actually started to feel normal again. Not to mention the isolation, like all of that we all went through, right? And so I basically came out of the whole experience saying, look, never again, because you cannot fill from an empty cup. You can't pour from an empty cup. If you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not resting, you're not healing, you are going to run out of battery. You're going to run out of juice, and that serves nobody, in my opinion. So never again for me. And I spent a lot of time trying to learn new skills, things that I thought I could never do. For example, like how to take deep breaths. For years people had said, okay, just breathe, like take a deep breath, right? Like, and I was just like, oh, that doesn't work. I don't need to do that. No, like it actually does.
It
help.
Works. It does.
And it's something so easy, right? So small. So how to meditate a little bit, and not, in a, like, it doesn't have to be any fashion of that, but just how to sit silently and also how to recognize my thought patterns. And when, I noticed things kind of spiraling, how to catch myself and say, wait a minute, no, that's not true. You're lying to yourself right now. You're so in it that you can't see and I mean, look, if we look at a hurricane, right? Like you're in the center of the hurricane. You can't see it, what's around you.
That's exactly right.
So it's about kind of stepping back and taking that perception, that kind of high level overview and saying, wait a minute, like something has to change here. So it's something we don't talk about.
We don't.
And throw in the mix, you have children, you have a family, you have all these other things going on. I, for one, I mean, the stress was pouring out of me. I lost my hair. I was like, it was just, very symptomatic, right?
Yeah.
So now a few things, aside from the technical skills that I've learned. The other thing I've learned is to not get overly attached to the outcomes, because at the end of the day, you can only do so much. And sometimes we try to take it all on. It's very easy to watch the news or, to be in an emergency response environment and feel like you have to solve everything. You have to stay until everything is fixed. And the fact is you can't do it all. So I've kind of detached a little bit. And that's allowed me to enjoy my personal life without having to take home work all the time. So yeah,
I mean, that's a lifelong skill.
Yeah, exactly.
that we have to work on. It is, and for everyone in this field and many other sort of on-call responder fields. But what I like there that you said is, so two things really kind of hit me, is there is a bit of shame or guilt or, that still exists for us to say, I need to take time. I need a day off. I need to decompress. There is some stigma around that still. And I think the more we talk about it, having you tell that story is really important, because I know that there are so many women out there that take so much on their shoulders that I think if they just opened up to the folks around them, they would start to feel like it's not on their shoulders.
Yeah. They're not alone.
Yes, and that it's a personal manifestation of, all of the things going on around you. So number one, share, the feelings that you're having is something that I've learned. And the other is, don't be ashamed to take the time, because at the end of the day, it is a job. It's an amazing job, but it really is just a job. So Michelle, day to day now that you're sort of in blue sky days, you work full time, you have, friends and family and a whole life. So how do you keep that positive trajectory going? Is it hard for you to make that time for personal resilience, or do you kind of have it down pat? And I'm going to tell you, I'll confess here that I know all of the ways and things that I should be doing. I've had some real hard conversations with myself and with, my therapist, and I'm not shy to say, how do I keep myself invigorated and engaged, and how do I not let myself disconnect from parts of my life in order to benefit the other parts, because I don't want to do that anymore. And I still find that really difficult. I travel a lot for work. I have lots of things on the side like you, and I know that if I get outside every day and go for a run, even for 30 minutes, I'll feel better. Or if I can get to a yoga class or even log into one online these days, then I need to do that. And I actually rely on my family and my friends to say, hey, you haven't got out of your office chair in a couple of days. Maybe you need to go for a run, or meet me at yoga on Friday. Like I rely on those external forces to help me, because I don't do it for myself sometimes if I get too entrenched in, something I'm passionate about. So how do you keep that momentum going for yourself?
Oh, no, I mean, I'm definitely not perfect. None of us are. I make mistakes all the time still. A few things. I mean, number one, I'm just a very passionate and driven person in general. So I'm pretty high energy most of the
Hmm.
time, but I've realized like it's kind of like that work hard, play hard. I'm
Yeah.
starting to understand what that means. And for me, and this is just kind of how I'm approaching it, I stopped trying to have 100% balance because it just doesn't exist, right? Like right now, I'm very passionate about my career and I spend a lot more time doing that than, some of my other hobbies, for
Hmm.
example. But so on a day to day, I'm not as focused on, okay, how balanced am I, right? Am I making
Yes.
sure, and don't get me wrong, I hold myself accountable for eating healthy and going to the gym and doing all of
Yes.
those things that we need to kind of keep the rest of our lives going. But I stopped being hard on myself. I stopped kind of criticizing myself like, oh, you didn't make it to the gym today. It's like, pick up your boots tomorrow. It's a new day. We'll do it tomorrow. So more I look at the approach of like overall balance of my life, within each of the areas that I'm doing. So it's not balancing my work life with my family life. It's like when I'm with my family and my friends now,
You're with
I put
them.
my phone away. And
Yeah.
I give them my attention and I'm with them. And then when I'm at work, the balance has come because I'm passionate about what it is that I'm doing. I'm not no longer doing or working for anybody that I don't want to be or doing something I don't want to be doing or don't agree with. I'm in environments where, okay, I'm aligned, right? With my
Hmm.
passion is aligned with what I'm doing. That doesn't mean that every day is easy or that every day is fun, but it makes the drive a lot easier, and I have a gratitude journal. I really try to stay focused on what I'm really grateful for. And even on those days that are really difficult, I can always pull out the lessons and the value from them. So those types of little activities really help me. And getting back to the work hard, play hard, it's like, I've gotten to a point in my career where I recognize that, for example, I'm on call at times and, my phone will be going off in the middle of the night.
Hmm.
And so I balance that out with when I'm not on call, I turn my phone completely off. I don't
Oh,
open my laptop and I immerse myself in the fun activities, whatever it is that I'm doing with the people that I care about. And I completely, to your point, I don't disconnect in the sense that I don't care. I just give myself the right
permission.
to, yeah, the permission exactly to be something else, right? Like because for so long I just identified myself as like my career, like hi, I'm Michelle, this is who I am,
Yep.
and I'm like, wait a minute, there's this whole other side to me. So I give myself the permission to kind of quote unquote play hard. And sometimes play hard is just literally hanging out at home, right?
Yep.
Having, maybe a glass of wine and watching movies all night. Like it doesn't have to be a crazy, event. It's just kind of having the separation and allowing myself the space to be all the other things that I also am outside of just my EM career. And that's really, really helped. And to your point, having loving people that care about you and are there for you. And look, I mean, those types of relationships take effort too, right? Like
They do.
I've recognized that I have to give if I want to receive in those areas. So, yeah, I just really try to, yeah, have fun and be present in the moment. That's the other thing, just really staying. I think what happened in COVID that was very obvious to me is I was so focused on when in the future this was going to end and being prepared for it that it created a lot of anxiety because it was like I was always living for the next day, and now I'm just kind of living for today and just enjoying today and letting the path lead me as opposed to always having to plan it out and think I know where I'm going. So these are just some things that have helped me.
I think so. All of that is, I think, extremely helpful for our listeners. And thank you so much for, the honesty and sharing. And I think there's a lot to take away from that. And certainly, I would say I absolutely agree with you in that, I held myself up to this standard of I'm always on call, I'll always answer the
Yeah.
phone, I'll always
Mhm.
be there when whoever needs me needs me. And I've now come to realize that, as you say, I don't need to have my phone at the dinner table. I don't
Yeah.
always need to answer that call if I'm not on call.
Yeah.
And to make myself a priority in those around me. So thank you. Michelle, I want to thank you so much for the insights that you have shared with the Resilient Heroes today, some of the lessons that you've learned along the way, and really some of the things that you're looking forward to in the future. And so, to that, I say thank you for gracing us with your time this morning. And I'll
Awesome.
ask, would you be open to, anyone who's listening to reach out to you on LinkedIn to chat with you if they have questions or comments about anything you've said today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just want to say, look, I thank you so much for having me. And of course love sharing my story and hearing where
Yes.
other people are coming from. But the one thing I feel that we could do better of in EM across the board is sharing resources, sharing knowledge, not just, it's not just the accolades that, I've
No.
accomplished. I have a lot of resources and tools that I, would love to share with other people. And I'm always looking, to improve like the tools and the skills I have. So absolutely would love to reach out and talk to anybody on LinkedIn, and maybe even come back one day and we could do a session on some free tools and tips and tricks on certain elements of emergency management for people. But yeah, of course, absolutely, find me on LinkedIn, please.
I would absolutely love to have you back. That would be amazing. And I will let you go now, Michelle. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me, and everybody stay safe out there.
The opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Buffalo Computer Graphics. All content is for informational purposes only. Are you or someone you know a resilient hero and would be interested in contributing to our podcast? We would love to hear from you. Please contact us at RHpodcast@buffalocomputergraphics.com.